After the groundbreaking revelation of his cosmic form, Krishna once again turns his discourse in a new direction. Now he begins to expand on the philosophy of Sankhya. As mentioned, Sankhya is a process of analysis which distinguishes what is material in nature and what is spiritual in nature. Arjuna, you should also understand that I am the knower of the fields, present within all fields. Knowledge of both the field and the knower of the field is knowledge indeed. The field, as Krishna puts it, is our body which is part of creation, and within this body is the knower which is Krishna himself. He is the witness within each and every living being. This body, like all of the material world, is made up of the 24 elements. This can be broken down into dormant, non-manifested matter, the 5 elements of creation, the ego, intellect and mind. There is also the 5 organs of action, the 5 senses of perception, and the 5 objects that are perceived. All this together makes up the field of matter. But when one has jnana or spiritual wisdom, one can see through this superficial creation. Such a person has detachment from the objects of the senses, is free of ego, and perceives the misery of birth, death, old age, disease and suffering. Wisdom allows us to recognize the shallow material world and detach from the field. But when this is done, what is it that we should know? What should we strive to realize? Krishna describes the thing to be known as having its hands and feet everywhere in the world. It has its eyes, ears, heads and mouths everywhere, and thus it pervades all things. Essentially, it is this divine mystery that we should try to realize. This divinity permeates everything. It is outside and within, both near and far. It exists, yet it does not exist. This is Krishna. Once we have come to realize that we are not this body, once we have developed this state of detachment, we move to the realization of our relationship with Krishna. His unfathomable presence within us and within everything becomes apparent. Knowing this state is the goal of life. Krishna states that both the Purusha or soul and Prakriti or matter have actually existed eternally and have not been created. The Purusha, when in contact with Prakriti, becomes subject to joy and sorrow. This entanglement causes one to be born again repeatedly. But one who is able to understand this process becomes free from the influence of material nature. They realize that all action happens within Prakriti, and they, as the Purusha, remain unstained and untouched. In chapter 14, Krishna explains the importance of the 3 Gunas. These qualities influence Prakriti or material existence and therefore play a major role in dictating our spiritual evolution. Satva is goodness and causes illumination and knowledge. Rajas is passion which forces us to act and engage. Tamas is ignorance which brings negligence and idleness. These gunas are constantly in flux, with one becoming more dominant than the others. The balance between these gunas is what decides the nature of the experience we have. If Sattva prevails within, we'll be elevated to grow on our spiritual path. Rajas binds us to the results of action, causing us to stay entrapped where we are. And Tamas, however, degrades and drags us down to lower planes of existence. In later chapters, Krishna explains exactly how the gunas affect all aspects of life. The goal of life, however, is to reach that state beyond the gunas, a state which is untainted by their influence. Such a person is free. He remains indifferent, as if undisturbed by the gunas, thinking, it is the gunas alone that are active. He thus remains steady and does not waver. One who has transcended the gunas is beyond material existence, beyond duality. Like with Karma Yoga, Krishna makes clear that if we realize that we are the Atma, we become the witness. The body and mind may be subject to Prakriti controlled by the gunas, but we as the soul are aloof and beyond their influence. In chapter 15, Krishna compares this entanglement with the material world and gunas to an inverted, upside-down banyan tree. With its branches below and roots above, it seems to have no beginning or end. But if we can surrender to the Supreme and be aware of who we truly are, the Atman, then we can cut through the tree and gain freedom. We reach the supreme abode of Krishna, from which we do not return. Krishna makes clear that our soul, the jiva, is actually a part of him. As it enters material existence, it draws to it the senses, mind and body. In every incarnation, we create impressions or samskaras through different experiences we have. Just as a wind carries aromas from place to place, the soul carries these impressions from previous lives to the next incarnation. This is how karma works. The jiva is untouched by anything material, but the force of previous desires and actions propels one to the next birth. Krishna reminds Arjuna that it is not only the soul which is a part of him, his presence is also inextricably woven into the physical universe. The energy emanating from the sun which illumines the entire universe, and that of the moon and fire as well, you should know that energy to be mine alone. This aspect of Krishna which enters this world and sustains it is known as the Paramatman. The energy of this universe, even our own bodies, are governed by the potency of Krishna. The power of the sun, the light of the moon, even our ability to digest food is all run by the unseen force of Krishna. This material world is kshara, or subject to decay and change. Our soul, or purusha, however, is constant and eternal. But even above this soul, there is the Purushottama, or Supreme Person, Krishna himself. Like in chapter 7, Krishna outlines 3 levels of existence, all of which are governed and part of him. Chapter 16 enters a new topic altogether in which Krishna outlines the character and qualities of what he calls the Devi Sampad, the nature of the gods, and the Asuri Sampad, the way of the Asuras. The Devas are those who dwell in the higher planes of existence and are perpetually in conflict with their evil and arrogant cousins, the Asuras. The way of the gods is described as one of virtue and nobility. Not harming, truthfulness, avoiding anger, renunciation, never malaligning others, compassion for other beings, and never wavering. It is these qualities which pave the way for one to achieve liberation from continual rebirth, whereas the path of the Asuras leads us to further bondage. In the next few verses, Krishna describes at length the nature of someone who follows the Asuric way. Having hatred to all, they engage in cruel deeds and bring destruction to the world. Being distracted by so many different notions, entangled in a net of delusion, and addicted to the enjoyment of their senses, they fall down into an impure state of hell. Essentially, one who is ruled by Asuric qualities lives to feed the ego. They care nothing for higher ideals, and are cruel and selfish. They are motivated solely by material success, and cannot recognize anything beyond this physical world. Instead of acknowledging the unseen presence of Krishna, they believe that they are the doer of action, the enjoyer of all pleasure, and the reservoir of all power. Such persons repeatedly fall to lower worlds and suffer the consequences for their hatred and immorality. Krishna specifically points out desire, anger, and greed as the principal vices which open the doorway to these lower realms. He asks Arjuna to abandon such qualities and take seriously the ideals contained in the revealed scriptures. But Arjuna asks in response, what if one ignores the scriptures and acts of his own will? What will be their fate? Krishna replies that it depends on the gunas that are predominant. Satva, Rajas, and Tamas dictate the nature of a person. As mentioned, Satva will inevitably cause one to achieve higher progress. Rajas will bind one into materialism, and Tamas will drag one down. Based on this theme, Krishna describes a number of things in relation to these gunas. Some perform rituals selflessly for a higher ideal. Others do them for material gain, and there are still those who perform them carelessly and without faith. Gaining control of ourselves is also important, but performing such austerity can be done in different ways. Ideally, the body, speech, and mind should be restrained for the benefit of others and to remain in a serene state. But we can also use austerity to feed our spiritual pride and make us believe we are an advanced seeker. There are even those who mistakenly use austerity to destroy their body and inflict pain upon themselves. Giving charity to others is also a wonderful thing. But how we give is critical. When we give in a detached way to the right people at the right time, it is sattvic. When we give to receive the respect and accolade of others, it is rajasic. And when we give to those who are unsuitable at the wrong place and time, it is tamasic. By highlighting these points, Krishna explains to Arjuna that in every aspect of life, we have a choice to give in to laziness and ignorance, to indulge in selfishness and greed, or to strive and engage with life in a way that elevates us to truth. Now the Gita enters into the final 18th chapter. So far, Krishna has been talking about austerity, rituals, and charity. But now Arjuna wants to know if such acts can be renounced when one has progressed to a higher spiritual realization. Krishna is clear, as he has been in earlier chapters on Karma Yoga, that actions and duties must not be abandoned. Those who are filled with tamas renounce their duties out of delusion. Others who are rajasic do so because of the fear of suffering. but real sattvic renunciation is done on an inner level, not the outer. Whether our duty is pleasing or not, the mature seeker always carries it out. Krishna then describes the nature of action further. For any action to happen, there needs to be a location, a performer of action, the senses which engage with creation, the actual effort to act, and destiny. In saying this, Krishna makes clear that destiny is just one factor. Life is not completely predetermined by fate or karma. Our effort, blended together with the results of past actions, creates future circumstances. But as stated numerous times, if one has risen to that place where they no longer perceive themselves as the doer of action, then they are free of all karmic consequences. Like in the previous chapter, Krishna continues to give Arjuna more grounding practical knowledge about different aspects of life in relation to the gunas. To act, one needs intelligence. The intelligence which can discriminate what should and shouldn't be done is sattvic. But where there is confusion on these matters, one is rooted in rajas. But the worst of all is when one assumes through stupidity that what is righteous is actually unrighteous, and more dangerously, perceives that what is unrighteous is righteous. Even the kind of happiness we experience has its place in the gunas. Sometimes things in life appear as poison in the beginning, but gradually mature into nectar because of clarity and acceptance. But often what appears as exciting and joyful in the beginning ends up bringing suffering. And happiness which is delusional is based on stupidity and ignorance. Krishna spends significant time with Arjuna walking through the gunas. By understanding these ideas, we are given a framework to self-analyze. Through introspection, one can constantly assess which guna is dominating us in that particular moment. As a result, one can discover the qualities we have which are elevating, binding, or degrading us. Next, Krishna explains the four varnas or divisions that exist within society, namely the Brahmins, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Shudras. Each of them displays certain qualities which allow them to carry out certain roles within society. While Krishna always states that everyone is equal since everyone has a divine Atman within, not everybody is the same since we all display different characteristics. Brahmins are tranquil, filled with honesty and patience. Kshatriyas are heroic, charitable and full of energy. Vaishyas deal with business and agriculture. And Shudras look to serve others. In this way, Krishna explains that every individual has a unique purpose or dharma. Even though it may have faults, one's own dharma is still superior to accepting the dharma of another, even if that dharma is perfectly observed. Krishna reinforces the idea that the dharma or duty that we are faced with should not be abandoned. Life has given us a path and a role in the world. Even if we make mistakes, it is better to carry on in our path rather than taking up another duty not meant for us. If we do our duty without attachment, then we are practicing karma yoga. This yoga will inevitably bring mastery over our mind and senses and lead us to going within and finding our true self. When one is established in this way, beyond the sways of pain and pleasure, then real love for Krishna manifests. Such a person knows Krishna as he really is and enters into him. Therefore, Krishna urges Arjuna to focus his mind upon him. He tells him not to give in to pride and run away from his dharma. But ultimately, the decision to fight is down to Arjuna. I have now revealed to you this wisdom, which is the deepest of all mysteries. After fully considering what you have heard, you should then act as you see fit. Despite being the Supreme Lord, despite having clearly instructed Arjuna, Krishna does not force him. He is not a deity that inflicts punishment for those who wish to pursue their own ideas. Spirituality is an experience, and we have the free will to choose if we want to progress or not. Finally, after delivering so much teaching, after going through all different yogas, techniques and paths, Krishna delivers the most powerful and clearest instruction to Arjuna. Abandoning all types of dharma, take shelter with me alone. I will deliver you from all sins, so do not grieve. This is the closing teaching of Krishna, that whatever we have in our minds, whatever ideas and philosophies we have constructed, we need to abandon them. Emptied of all pride, we should give ourselves at the feet of Krishna. Even though we may be unqualified, caught by this material existence, there is nothing to fear. If we offer everything to Krishna, he will wipe the slate clean. The devotee is one who takes shelter and sees that Krishna is the only refuge. He knows that through his grace he will be liberated. This is Krishna's emphatic promise to his devotees. Having heard this statement of Krishna, all of Arjuna's doubts, all his fears have been eradicated. From a helpless, distraught state, Krishna has brought him to the point of pure surrender. Sanjaya has been narrating the whole discourse to King Dhritarashtra. He rejoices in ecstasy at everything he has seen and heard. As if warning the king, Sanjaya finally states, "Wherever there is Krishna, the master of yoga, and wherever there is Arjuna who bears the bow, there will always be good fortune, victory, success, and good judgment. This is my opinion." Thus ends the Bhagavad Gita. This sacred conversation between Arjuna and Krishna has formed the foundation of Indian spirituality for millennia. It has consoled and inspired people from all walks of life, from great acharyas to Western philosophers. This three-part series has only scratched the surface of the Gita, but will hopefully allow you to go deeper into the timeless wisdom it contains. Many thanks for listening.